Welcome back to the First Team. I'm Joe DeLeone, and with me is my co-host, NFL draft analyst for A to Z Sports, Ryan Roberts. And today we've got another expert opinion joining us to help us get prepared for the 2024 college football season and the 2025 NFL draft. That being the Athletics' Dane Brugler, who just dropped his big board not too long ago. We're going to dive in on that and talk a little bit about some of the top prospects that he highlighted for his grouping for 2025. Dane, appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us. We're excited to dive in and talk a little bit more about this class.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine, guys. Thanks for having me. The summer's fun, but now it's time to get back to football, and this is a really exciting time of the calendar, right? I mean, it's almost like Christmas Eve. We got the season starting here pretty quick, both college and the NFL. Time to get eyes on new tape. Hopefully, some new players emerge, especially for this class. But yeah, it's a fun time of the calendar.
Well, Dane, we really appreciate you for fitting us in because, like you said, college football is getting started. NFL is about to kick up here very soon, and then summer scouting is now kind of dwindling a little bit. So I'm curious, just kind of looking at this class, early impressions of it. What do you make of this class? Because I know you said you're hoping that some guys kind of take a step forward a little bit, maybe some guys emerge. What is just your early pulse on the 2024 class in its entirety?
When I do my summer scouting, I really try to go position by position. So I'll dive into quarterbacks and I'll do the offense first. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, offensive line, tight ends, and I was pretty underwhelmed by this offensive group. Now there are obviously some really good players, but starting with maybe the quarterbacks kind of set the stage for what this offensive draft class is, but the quarterbacks didn't wow me. I mean, we don't have any quarterbacks in this draft class that are slam dunk, no doubt about it, top 10 picks, where a year ago at this time, I think we thought that way about Caleb. We thought that way about Drake May. Obviously, Jaden Daniels came out of nowhere. But, I mean, even a guy like J.J. McCarthy, I believe, he was a first-round pick at this time last year. He started in last year's top 50. He started at, 20 overall for me. I think that this quarterback class, Carson Beck out of Georgia, Shedeur Sanders, Colorado, Quinn Ewers, Texas, Wegman, Aller. I mean, there's a lot of names, but will any of these guys really ascend to being true top 10 guys? And any of them even higher? Well, will there be a guy we're talking about 4 months from now as, okay, yeah, you know what? He has earned the way he has played on the field. He deserves to be talked about as that number one overall pick. And right now, I don't think we can really say that. Now, obviously, we know quarterbacks rule the day, and at the end of the draft process, whether or not a quarterback should be going that high, they might. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But this quarterback class kind of left me. And I think we saw this coming based off of last year, so it wasn't a huge surprise, but still not great. Running backs is actually a really good class. Receivers, a good class, maybe not as high end as last year. Offensive line up and down. So the offense left me wanting more, but then I started watching the defense, and that got me excited because the pass rushers, the corners, it's a really strong group of defensive players this year.
Oh, well, Dane, kind of working off of that, actually, if I can real quick, Joe, because I wanted to ask you about maybe a surprise player that you had this summer, because I know, in this space, you're seeing Blesto, you're hearing NFS stuff, you're talking to teams, obviously, so you're hearing a bunch of varying opinions. Was there a player, because there's a couple that I wanted to ask you about, because a couple that really caught my eye that I actually am very high on as well. Are there a couple players or a player that you felt you had a preconceived notion on, or there was kind of early chatter on before you even watched him, and then you came out and were like, oh, that dude's legit. That dude's a very good player?
Yeah, I mean, Abdul Carter from Penn State, who, if you watch any Penn State tape the last 2 years, you knew who Abdul Carter was. He had some hype as a freshman because he hit the ground running for that team. Last year, he was making plays. I mean, watch the Ohio State tape, and you see him all over the field. His range against the run, his ability to get after the quarterback, his fluidity when he's dropping in space. And then you see, okay, he's moving to edge full time, at least more of an edge role in 2024 as a junior. And then you really focus on his traits and his ability. And I mean, you guys know when you're watching these players, some just move differently. And for me, Abdul Carter, really, when I really focused on his tape, okay, this guy moves differently. It's twitch, it's just the fluidity in his body, his hips, his joints, and how easy it is for him to hit that burst and then regain that momentum, and that change of direction is really special. So now, obviously, rushing off the edge takes more than athleticism. I mean, you need to have a plan. You need to set up blockers. There's a lot of technique and things that go into it. So we'll see how he develops this year. But just based off the athlete, based off of the natural force that he creates getting downhill, I felt comfortable putting him at number 2 overall in my early top 50, having him that high, because he was just one of the players that blew me away. And I knew he was good. When I really had a chance to study him, I was like, okay, this guy is different. Has a chance to be a really special player. And obviously, you see that number 11 jersey, and so Micah Parsons, that's a natural comparison. I don't think it's crazy. I really don't, because of the way he moves and how different he is. So there's some development he needs to show this year, moving full time to that role. But it's not like we're going to see him, not dropping in space anymore or anything like that. We'll still see him do a lot of different things for that Penn State defense. New coordinator, a little bit. The scheme will look a little bit different, but I'm definitely excited to see what he can do this year.
So on that note with Abdul Carter, assuming that none of these quarterbacks end up emerging as somebody worthy of going first overall, James Pierce has been another name that's been just generally thrown out there by folks in the draft community as a possible first overall pick. Do you think Abdul Carter or somebody else could be that first overall selection?
This year, the number 1 overall pick, I think, is going to be wide open. Obviously, if you're the worst team in the NFL and you have the number 1 overall pick, chances are you need a quarterback, right? And so it's interesting when you look back at kind of the luck of when you have that number 1 pick. If you have the number 1 overall pick in 2021, you get Trevor Lawrence. You have in 2022, you get Travon Walker. If you have the number 1 pick last year, you get Caleb Williams. Number 1 pick this year, who is going to be that guy? And so I think Will Johnson, from Michigan, he was the number 1 guy on my top 50 board. Could we see a corner go that high? Sure. Why not? I mean, corner is a premium position. This is an edge rush group with a couple guys that are in that top 10 conversation. I don't know that any of the offensive linemen deserve top 10 talk. Maybe by the end of the season, we'll think that way. But yeah, this is a draft class where, you hope you find guys that you watch and you're like, okay, yeah, this is a top 5 pick. This year, I kind of felt that way about Will Johnson, kind of felt that way about Abdul Carter, but they didn't really. This isn't a class what just blew you away with, okay, this is a definite top 10 talent. And especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that's what, we saw last year. The first defensive player wasn't drafted until pick 15. So This is NFL wants offensive players. They want guys that help affect the scoreboard. And this draft, it just doesn't have those guys, at least at this point. So if we see defensive heavy early, it shouldn't be a surprise.
Dane, so a player that popped up in your top 50, I believe he was number 12, if I remember correctly. I don't have the list in front of me. But this young man from ECU, cornerback, I think it's Savon Ravel is actually probably pronounced. It could be completely incorrect on that. But I wanted to ask about him because fascinating backstory that we've talked about. He was a North Carolina kid, went to Lewisburg College originally, played a little bit in 2022 for ECU, but not a ton. I think only 8 total tackles. And then this past year, he really broke out. But I mean, I don't have a verified on him, but he's listed somewhere between 6'2", 6'3", really incredible athlete. Would love to hear your opinion of him because he started out in a very good spot in your top 50 here.
Yeah, I going into watching his tape, I had heard he was a freak, and I was going in with expectations, which I try to my best to avoid any expectations. I mean, some of these guys, you see them on tape just watching college football in the fall. You see them on TV, and then when you're studying guys, other players, you can't help but notice other players, and so you start to take mental notes, or so you have a preconceived notion on some of these players. With Revel, I didn't know really anything except that he was supposed to be a freak. So I throw on the tape, and he lived up to it. Size, speed. What I loved the most about him, I think, was besides just the physical traits, his ability to use the sideline. I mean, he is a bully out there, and he will pin you against the sideline and use his body to pin you, go up, look for the football, go up and make a play. He looks very comfortable changing directions. He is not afraid to get his hands on you. If he does surrender a little bit of space, he makes it up in a flash. So, and now ECU, I wish we saw him. We saw him against Michigan last year, so you can watch that tape. And he had a good game, not a great game, but I mean a solid game. He played well. The rest of the competition's mostly AAC competition, and it's the same thing this year. ECU, I believe they don't have a big time opponent in terms of Power 4 and SEC Big Ten. They don't have any type of opponent like that on the schedule. So we have to go based off of what he's doing at AAC competition. And, I think this is a guy we're going to be talking about throughout the season, and there's going to be a lot of hype going into Senior Bowl. Going into the all-star circuit, see how he does against some better receivers, and then can he live up to the freak moniker at the combine? Because he on the field, it looks like it. It looks like he has all the tools to be a top-level guy. So 12 in my top 50, maybe a little bit rich based off of just really one season of doing it. But I was really blown away when you think of guys in the NFL and what NFL teams want. He kind of checks a lot of those boxes. And so I would not be surprised at all if he's a top 12, 15 pick next April.
Well, we talked about him on the podcast, Dane, and I had compared him a little bit to like Antonio Cromartie of what I remember him coming out of Florida State, because like the height, weight, speed is incredible, obviously, but then you see him change direction and you're like, oh, that's a little bit different, man. Like that's very unique for a guy that's a little bit high-legged, right? So yeah, I know, Joe, we talked about it, man, but Revel is a very impressive athlete. There's no doubt about that.
If you're going to throw on ECU tape, you want a guy that's he's going to show it to you right away. You don't, especially a corner, you can tell pretty quickly the athletes from the good athletes. You can tell the guys that are really different. He jumps out right away as being a different level of guy, both with the speed, the change of direction, and again, the way that he uses a sideline, because he lines up primarily in the boundary. The way that he will physically get his hands on you and just make it a rough ride for those receivers, that really stood out.
So we had Connor Rogers on that long ago to talk about this running back class because it's just so talented. I was really surprised when I was reading your big board that you had a number of guys in your top 50, but Omarion Hampton from North Carolina was one that stood out to me. I feel like his ranking is on a wide spectrum for a lot of people. Some people either like really love him to this degree or aren't super juiced up about him and think he's maybe a little bit later on in this running back grouping. What caught your attention with Hampton, and why was he your third running back?
I'm not sure what's not to like about him. I mean, he's 5'11 3/4, 220 pounds. He runs with determination, balance, power, and he also has speed. I mean, the popular clip from last year was the Andrew Wiggins forced fumble on the Clemson tape. But earlier in that clip, he's also running over Barrett Carter, the linebacker, and it took literally a 4.2 athlete to track Hampton down from behind. No one else was catching him. So, this is a guy that has a lot of things that you want at the running back position. And so, no Drake May this year, obviously. We'll see what the passing game looks like. So they're going to rely a lot on that run game. His ability to break tackles is what really stands out. He had more yards after contact last year than any other player in college football. So his balance to break those tackles, win at the line of scrimmage, And also, I really liked what he did in pass pro. And I try not to harp too much on, because like most running backs, 95% of them, just they're not very good at pass pro in college. Yeah. That's just the way it is. So you don't. I feel you try to focus on, kind of the traits and kind of things that they can get better at and things. Hampton, I thought, was one of the better pass protecting backs I watched this year. So I think that you have a guy here that checks a lot of boxes with what I want at the running back position, and can be a true 3-down guy. And so I didn't give him a first round grade, but I thought this is clearly a solid second round type of running back. This running back class is awesome, but the Boise State kid, Jane T, he's my top guy. I think he could go in the first round. Ollie Gordon, he's number 2 for me to start the season, but then the Hampton right behind him at number 3. But this is a really good running back class where I can understand why some people might prefer a Travion Henderson from Ohio State, Quinshon Judkins, Ohio State. There's some other guys in this class. So I don't by any means think that Hampton's a clear top 3 back and he's a top 40 pick. I mean, this is just a really good running back group. And so you're kind of picking and choosing what type of running back you like, the style and different things that they can do. With Hampton, I just think that the strengths, the pros to his game really stand out more so than anything else.
So if I could ask about a linebacker real quick, Dane, because I feel like most people know the name Harold Perkins. We've known names that you mentioned Barrett Carter in that clip as well. Like we've known about Barrett Carter for some time. We've known about like Jamon Dumas Johnson for some time now. Linebacker that showed up in your top 50 that I don't think people are talking about enough, and I would love your insight on, is Lander Barton out of Utah, who is a very interesting prospect. I know he was a little bit limited last year. I think he had a little bit of an injury, which kind of cost him a few games. But your thoughts on Barton and why you're so high on him early on in this process?
Yeah, he had a right foot injury that sidelined him for second half of the 2023 season. People will recognize the last name, that Barton name. His brother Cody was a third rounder, probably like 5 years ago now. His other brother Jackson was a 7th rounder. But the people at the Utah in that program, they look at Lander as being, okay, this is the best athlete in the family. This is the guy that is the best football player. And so you saw it in flashes last year. He's kind of a do everything guy. And, you see a little bit of Leighton Vander Esch. You see a little bit of, you see a lot of different types of running back or linebackers because he can do it all. He's physical downhill. He looks comfortable dropping in space, so he can change directions and chase the football. Very smooth when asked to cover, whether he's mirroring a back out of the backfield. He's zone dropping and taking up space to take away some of those passing lanes to slot receivers. So he was born into a football family. And he might be the best of the group with that kind of do everything skill set. Now, needs to be a little more consistent in terms of just staying on the field and showing that development that you want to see. But as when you just isolate the traits and say, okay, where can he be 2 years from now? I can get pretty excited. So yeah, Barton was pretty high for me in my early top 50. I think somewhere in the top 32. So obviously I think very highly of his talent and where I think he can do if he stays healthy.
Last question I had, talking about these receivers, you were higher on Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona than Luther Burden. And I know Luther Burden's just been kind of a plugged-in, immediate pick for everybody for this top receiver spot. Some are picking him to win the Biletnikoff. What for you created that separation for McMillan, which isn't much because they were consecutive in your ranking, but what did you like over McMillan compared to Burden?
Yeah, and I like Burden. I mean, if you liked Malik Neighbors coming out last year, then you're going to like Luther Burden. Not one-to-one, players, but that can create from anywhere on the field, after the catch, before the catch, can get open, can do a lot of things for you. So yeah, Luther Burden, he's a guy obviously we've known since he was a recruit. He was a 5-star guy. He's not maybe the biggest, but he is stout. I mean, he has some power to him, 5'11", 210. So there's a lot to like about Luther Burden. I was really impressed with McMillan because it's hard to stop him. When you have a guy that's 6'5", 210 with that type of catch radius, good luck. He has go and get it skills. And, so the ball skills are fantastic. He doesn't drop the football. He's not an elite speed guy. Like, he's not going to go out there and run a 4.35. But watching him, there were times, especially after the catch, where he showed more juice than I was expecting. And it's not just straight line speed, but there's body flexibility there in his ankles. He can make a guy miss. So I was just more impressed with the overall package of what McMillan had to offer. And really, it comes down to that expansive catch radius. So I'm interested to see what he's going to run ultimately when we get to combine time and in pre-draft workouts. But because we know Burton's going to burn, but what can McMillan do this season to kind of, he might not have the fastest 40, but look, he can do this, he can do that. Because it was all over his 2023 tape, just all the other things that he can do. Arizona's going to look a little bit different this year, but you know what? Quarterback is back. And McMillan, it's not like he came out of nowhere. He was one of the highest recruits Arizona ever brought in. So, he was originally committed to Oregon, and then Arizona was able to flip him. Obviously, a lot of his high school teammates ended up going to Arizona too, and that was kind of a big reason why. So, he had such a big season last year. What can he do for an encore this upcoming season as a junior?
Well, Dane, that's all we had for you today. Appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us. Anything else coming out before the season starts or after the season starts that folks could be looking out for?
I've got a feature going up today on The Athletic about Mark Gronowski, South Dakota State quarterback who
love that.
He turned down a lot of money from FBS schools to go back to South Dakota State. And you think about, they lost Isaiah Davis, their top rusher, the Yankee twins, at receiver, a couple members of that offensive line. So there were a lot of reasons. The offensive coordinator went to Northwestern. So there were a lot of reasons for him to say, okay, I've won back-to-back national titles at the FCS level. Time for me to move on. But it was a good sit down with him to find out why he decided to stay. I mean, his dream is to play in the NFL. So why he felt like going back to South Dakota State was the best way for him to achieve that. A lot of money that he turned down. So that feature will be out this week, and hopefully people check that out, because we talked about with this quarterback class, there's a lot of opportunity for quarterbacks to maybe jump up this year. And there are scouts that think Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State could be that guy that moves up into that top 100 range and is a quarterback that maybe goes higher than most people are assuming at this point.
We've got a lot of subscribers on this channel, a disturbing amount that are Jackrabbit fans. So I'm sure that they're going to be excited to hear that article's coming out, and they're definitely going to check it out. Well, Dane, thank you so much, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch up with you later.